On February the 11th, 2024, my son Ozzy came into the world. Overnight, there was a seismic shift in my reality, and the weight of the responsibility to now care and provide for two human beings nestled on my shoulders. The first year of Ozzy's life has been the most rewarding, challenging, and at times overwhelming chapter of my story so far. He is the happiest little boy in the world, and I'm incredibly proud to be his dad, and this is my story. 12 months ago, my son Ozzy was born. He came into the world in quite interesting circumstances, and we've been having a lot of conversations recently, especially me and his mum, about the 12 months, and it's a really strange way to measure time, a child's life and how quickly things progress. I never really understood that phrase before, I don't think properly, that time moves so quickly until I had him, and you start to measure what he can do and the things he's able to do and how he interacts with the world. Especially recently, he's been learning things so quickly. And I look back now at photos of him when he was first born, and they don't even look like the same child. He's so small. We have a photo of him in the hospital where Connie's holding him, and his face fits between her forefinger and her thumb. Like, that's how small his head was. And I remember holding him for the first time and almost his whole body fitting in the palm of my hand. Now, I have to pretty much use a massive crane to hold him up because he's an absolute tank. So it's just it's been a wild ride. And one thing that Connie said to me the other day, which was really nice to hear actually, and when I do think back to when he was first born, was she said, God, you had so much energy and you were so positive when he had first born. Like, you really had this massive boost. And I did have that. I can remember like hearing people in the room when I was there with him say that, like kind of almost not whisper it, but I could hear it in the background of like, it really changed me for the better, and it gave me such a massive energy boost. I think it was an incredible amount of perspective, and I just was so proud. Like, I was just so proud to be a dad, to be his dad. I was so proud of Connie. I was so excited for the future. I was incredibly motivated. Everything just felt instantaneously more meaningful. But it certainly wasn't an easy start. And I think that the trauma of the way in which he came into the world was something that probably hit me like 6 months later, and it probably hit his mum pretty early on. Obviously, Connie had carried Ozzy for 9 months, and it wasn't the easiest pregnancy. She suffered with HD. I've spoke about that before. So for 6 months of that pregnancy, she was throwing up every day, and that was really tough. And then the way in which Ozzy came into the world, it ended up being a 40-hour labour, and then 40 hours for then 15 minutes of an emergency C-section. And when he was born, you're not really processing what's going on. You're just kind of on autopilot and just reacting to what you're being told, and you're putting blind faith into these strangers ultimately. He wasn't breathing when he was born, and he had to be resuscitated, which was, in that situation, I felt incredibly helpless because I had Connie asking me why he's not crying or why she can't hear him and is he alive. And then the nurses were obviously panicking a little bit, and they were saying, don't worry, he's in the best hands. I can't hear anything, but I'm looking at him. And it was a lot. And it was a lot of life in a very short space of time. And it was very frightening. And I was really surprised that there was no real aftercare for Connie, first and foremost, but also for me as the dad. Like, I'd witnessed all of that, and it was really frightening. And I remember, like, 3 days afterwards, just wandering around the hospital ward, just kind of aimlessly, not really staring at anything, just feeling completely, like, not there at all. And I remember going outside the ward down to where the cafe was, and just sitting, looking out of a window, just I was pretty broken, man, and I was obviously tired, and straight away I've got the weight of, like I said, this responsibility of now having to look after two people on my shoulders, because prior to that, like, Connie's a big girl, right? She can look after herself, and it's my job to look after myself first and foremost. But in that moment, they're so vulnerable. Like, it's like, whoa, I've gone from looking after one person to three. And that's a lot. That's very heavy. And you kind of, I've said this so many times on the podcast, you kind of imagine there's going to be this group of like wise elders that are going to sit around and say, okay, Sam, this is how it works, and we're going to help you through it. A bit like Star Wars, but that just does not happen. And it can be quite an isolating space. And it's a weird feeling because you don't want to feel sad and scared and frightened because you want to project strength and stability, but you also feel quite alone, I think, in those moments. And for me, yeah, I wish we'd had some kind of like closure. We asked for that and never got it. We asked that if somebody could come around and take us through what had actually happened, you know, in the process of his birth. But yeah, we never got that, and that's something I think is, yeah, it's a real shame because that trauma was a real thing. Like I found it really hard. And it lingered with me for a while, that did. But I think in those first early weeks and those early months, you really are just in survival mode. Like, for anyone that's about to embark on this journey, you just have to survive, man. Like, the sleep thing, I've spoke about it before, and lots of people get angry at me because, you know, it's a weird thing when you become a parent. There's a lot of, like, comparisons and judgment and all sorts of weird stuff, and I'm just not wired that way. So if I'm tired, I'm just going to tell you that I feel tired. I'm not going to say that I feel great. And but in the beginning, yeah, he wasn't the best sleeper, and he used to breathe like Darth Vader, so we'd both be like freaking out that he's not breathing properly. And gosh, I remember like in the beginning I would like I'd reach over when he was in our room and I'd check his mouth to see that he was still breathing. And then when he went into his own room, I used to do that to Connie. She gets so annoyed, man. She'd be asleep and I'd be like grabbing her mouth to check if she's thinking that she's Ozzy. So there was so much like weird sleep stuff. And I used to, you know, I've spoke on the podcast before about dropping him. So I dropped him pretty early on, and that still frightens me to this day. And I still feel like the worst dad in the world for doing that. But again, in that period when, you know, those two people are super vulnerable, you want to do everything you possibly can. And that's one thing I would say is I tried to do way too much, and I probably didn't accept help from others as much as I should have, and potentially Connie too. I was trying to do everything. I was trying to be super dad. I was trying to still work, be dad, be partner, do a lot of the night shifts for Connie because she'd had surgery and she wasn't in a great place, and I was just doing too much, and I was still trying to do the podcast and all of that, and then be a son and and it was just like way too much. I just couldn't cope with it. But you find a way to wrestle through it, and we got through that. And as much as, yeah, it is very difficult in the beginning, it is one of the most beautiful parts, because I was saying to Connie, I really miss him. Just, you know, I would sit there and we'd sit in the lounge watching TV, and I'd just stare at him like, I can't believe you're real. Like, this is just how we made you. Like, and he was so tiny, and he'd sit there on my legs, just tiny little man. I'd just sit there looking at him, and he'd just be staring at me like this, like, because in the beginning they can't see properly. They can't make out colors. Like, they only see black and white in the beginning, and they can't make out faces, and they can only see so far. And you see them just, it's such a cool thing. And you feel so proud and like protective when, particularly in that beginning phase, when they're so small and they really need you for everything. They can't move or do anything like that. And it is an amazing time. And you just, you know, you spend half of your time staring at your child and half of your time staring at your partner in amazement for how incredible they are. And that's one thing I just can't believe that, you know, I'm sure that our circumstances were maybe slightly different to a lot of parents that go through the birth. But I just can't believe that any woman comes out of that alive. It's mental. It was just incredible. And instantaneously, I had so much respect for all the women in my life, and the mums and my aunties and grandparents that have all had multiple children, which still baffles me to this day, because I feel like I need a rest for like 10 years now. But that beginning phase, is pretty wild. But that positive boost that I had is something that I do remember. And it's nice that people notice that. I think, you know, as somebody that has a track record of suffering with depression and anxiety, you know, I always had that deep fear of being able to be reliable, be stable for somebody else, be strong enough to support like a family and stuff. And then just in that moment, you just know what to do, you know? Like, I was always someone that before we'd had our son, I didn't want to hold a baby because I was like, I ain't got any clue how to hold a baby, like protect the neck. I just felt awkward, and I'd like, if a baby was being passed around, I'd treat it like it was a bomb. I was like, I don't want to go anywhere near it. So when I had him though, because I had no choice but to hold him because Connie couldn't, I didn't have a choice, and you just know what to do straight away. So any dads that have that feeling out there, and do you know what? Now, if I held a newborn, I think I'd have that fear again. I've like forgotten how I held him when he was first born. So yeah, don't worry, that's a normal thing. But when they come around, you just know what to do. It's like, it's automatic. It's just instinctive. And yeah, I miss that period. And I also miss that huge energy boost. I still have that, you know, but I think the further you are removed from that, from the first few weeks, I took 2 weeks off in the beginning. I had a great piece of advice from a friend back then, because I was going to go back to work after a week. And he said, Sam, like, if you're self-employed, what's the point of being self-employed if you can't take 2 weeks off when your first child's born? I was like, yeah, that's such a great point. And that was really good for me. I needed to hear that from somebody else, I think. And so I took those 2 weeks. I'm so glad I did take those 2 weeks, because I think that helped prolong that positive energy boost, because I was just around him and his mum all the time. Whereas as time goes on and you go out to work, you almost get stuck into like work mode, and you forget that he's back there at home with his mom. And it's not until you come back and you see him again, it like hits you straight away, and boom, the positive energy boost is back. As time goes on, that gets a bit harder, I think, and you know, it's just natural. You slip back into the normal routine of things, and at times work can feel more mundane again. And yeah, that energy boost in the beginning is an amazing thing, and I would advise anybody out there to take advantage of it. I know that I had a huge creativity boost as well at that time. I know that we did really well with the podcast around that time. Like, once Ozzy had been born and we were going into the early summer, some of those episodes that we produced with Magnastics and also with Kensley from Neutral Deductions, and in the lead up to the Olympics, some of those episodes have been the most viewed episodes and most downloaded episodes that we've done. I think we had a real good run at the Olympic Games. It was great for the podcast, and we did really, really well, and that all happened around that time. And, you know, we went on holiday, we went to France, and I just remember that being such a amazing week with him. And it was still certainly those first 6 months in some ways are the hardest, because you're just not sleeping, but they're also the best because you're new parents. And it's like that sweet spot where it's really, really cool. And certainly once you get into month 4, 5, 6, and he's starting to interact with the world, and he can see people, and he's laughing, and he's doing things and moving his hands and discovering himself and like his body as well. Like, that's such a cool little phase. I really, really enjoyed that. I think one thing that I did struggle with massively in the beginning was like that dad guilt of going out, leaving them at home and working. Like, I really found that quite tough. And anything that I did that wasn't purely work, I felt very guilty about. So if it was doing something for myself, like maybe going to the gym for an hour, or going to play football for an hour, it's just an hour, right? I just felt really guilty about that. Like, I struggle with that massively. I still find it a little bit hard. I'm like, there's like a constant tussle going on in my brain while I'm doing it even. Like, should I be here? Like, this isn't quite work. Like, how can I justify doing this? You know, I think you have this massive financial burden when you become a parent, especially if you're going to be the person that goes out and continues to work while your partner maybe goes off on maternity leave, depending on which way round that is. For me, like, I felt that pressure a lot, and I felt that pressure because I'd gone freelance in the January when we came back from traveling, and I had a good idea that we were going to try for a baby, and I had that kind of pressure that if we have a baby and Connie goes off work on maternity leave, I'm going to have to cover everything. And that was a big jump for me, you know? Like, it's really interesting how I had this conversation the other day with Connie again. When I first got offered a job, when I retired, it was a coaching job at the gymnastics gym. And I was offered a wage of around £22,000, I think, at the time. And I thought that was incredible. I was buzzing. I was like, what an amazing wage that is. Because I'd never really had a real job, right? Like, I'd been paid in like sponsorship money or funding from the government when I was on the GB team. And so I'd get lumps of sums and drips and drabs and stuff. But to have a stable wage, I was like, wow, that sounds like a great wage, you know. Little did I know that having a family and paying for everything in your house, that's not a great wage. So like that pressure of going from that to then being able to support the whole of the family, cover 2 wages, I felt that. And I think there's a real pressure to provide that you have when you're if you're in my situation and you're the dad and you're going to be the person going out to earn, especially if you're freelance, right? Because like the way I get paid for a lot of the work that I do is that I'll do the work today and I'll get paid hopefully in a few weeks or the next month. So like if you have a quiet month that hits you the next, like it's not always the most consistent work. So I know Sam will agree, and like it's a similar kind of thing that we do. So that's tough. That can be challenging. It's quite a mental stress to not have that stability of a consistent wage coming in every single month. So and obviously with the cost of living at the moment and inflation and everything, those bills have just gone up in the last 12 months or 2 years since I started. So it's a lot that I have to cover. That's quite a big number. And that felt like pressure to get to. So I had that on my shoulders, you know, because you really do. And one of the big parts of your job when you're a new dad is to provide. You feel that. It's like an innate thing. You even get it when they give you essentially like a folder of stuff to prepare you for parenthood. And there's like a small little booklet for the dad, and the majority of that booklet is finances. It's sorting out the child benefit. It's making sure you've got everything ready. It's funny, right? Really, but that is a big part of your role. And so for me, I felt that pressure. Particularly, I think going into the autumn time, I felt like first 6 months, definitely that sweet spot. And don't get me wrong, you're absolutely flatlined in terms of tiredness, and you get used to operate. This is one thing I would say, is that you just get used to operating on about 45%. If prior to having a child, you need to be at 80% to have a great day and be really good in your job and the work that you do, you're going to have to get used to being at like 45%, just somehow still managing to make it work and just turning up shattered. Like I'll turn up to do a school and I'll be like, this is going to be a mammoth task because I'm so tired. All I want is to sit in a quiet room and get an extra hour of sleep. But you're going to have to entertain like 400 children and be jazz hands all day. And you get that boost from doing that work because it's like the most amazing work and rewarding work. You get that feedback straight away from the crowd and the kids, and it's brilliant. You get through it. But I think, yeah, in that beginning, you just get used to operating. And you'll get some days where you get a better night's sleep and you'll be like, wow, this feels amazing. A funny thing that happens is as soon as you get a really good night's sleep after a period of terrible sleep, you actually feel worse. It's like, how's this happened? I've been like dreaming of sleeping for like 2 months, and now I feel worse than I did when I was up 3 or 4 times the night before. But getting used to operating on that is just something I didn't think I'd be able to do, but you just do. You just learn to manage on that. I'm sure that's how shift workers are able to do what they do. You know, when you hear of nurses or policemen or whoever it may be that are doing shift work and they work nights and stuff, I'm like, how do you do that? Because I just wouldn't be able. But I'm sure you just adapt and you get used to it and you kind of work around it. I guess the difference is there's no respite once the baby's awake. You're there, especially for mom, right? For the dads, you get to go out potentially and work, and you get that little bit of a break, and certainly that mental break. For the mom, that is all consuming, and it's there, and that is where you need to be there to really support your partner. But yeah, getting used to operating on that 45% is super important. But that changes, you know. I think once we got to 6 months and we got over that sweet spot period, yes, in some ways it got harder and it evolved and it changed, and there was that financial pressure going into the autumn for sure. In other ways, like, he started to change and it became a bit more manageable. I think I got used to some routine and structure, and I think the earlier you can get some structure and routine into your life, the better for both of you, whether it's like kind of normal wake-up times or sleep times, whether it's having things to do on the day. So Ozzy will go to sensory on a Thursday, I'll swim on a Friday. Those classes are a big thing as well for any new parents out there. And it's probably important for the dad, if you can, and you can go on your lunch break or not, go and see them. Because I think in the beginning I was like, what is this class, this sensory class, kind of what is it? But then when I went to one, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, this is worthwhile investing in this, because they get to be around so many other children, and they're learning and they pick things up a lot faster. And and I had a lot of fun, to be honest. It was really cool. I was just laughing at all it's like a load of babies. It's a bit like in Toy Story with the claw and the game where the claw goes down and picks a toy up and all the little green aliens are going, oh, like that. It's like that. All the babies are staring at the woman running the class. It's like the funniest thing to watch. And then seeing them in a swimming pool is just the oddest experience. Like, if you weren't a parent and you probably walked past that swimming pool, you'd be like, what on earth is going on there? Because there's all these babies being thrown into the swimming pool. It's such a strange thing. And I still can't get my head around how they just figure out how to swim so fast, and you can just throw them in and they'll essentially float. You know, we had Ashley Watson on the podcast like 18 months ago, and he was telling us how he was doing this project the next week where they were going to, I think it was Holland or Belgium, to work on this charity initiative where they basically was like, we're going to film people throwing babies into the swimming pool. And I was like, what? That sounds like the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard of. But yeah, it really is a thing. So doing those classes and getting some structure and routine, I think is super important. The earlier you can do that, probably the better. But yeah, certainly got more manageable at 6 months. I think you get used to the lack of sleep, and you probably get some periods where they start to sleep a little bit more. Every baby is obviously going to be different. I know for us, he started to, on the odd occasion, like sleep for big chunks of time, which felt like an absolute miracle. Like if he had slept through, you know, from late in the night till like 5, 6 in the morning, and we were just like celebrating like it was, you know, like we'd won the lottery. It was just incredible. It seems like a proper miracle at that point in time. And there was certainly like a breakthrough point at that. And then he starts moving and it's good, and you see him exploring the world. I really clearly remember watching the Olympic rings final, and it's the first time Ozzy crawled. And we were like, what? And did he crawl? No, he didn't crawl because it took him ages to crawl. He turned over. So he spun over from his back to his front. I was like, wow, maybe he'll be a rings worker, because his dad wasn't. And he is strong as an ox. But I'm just not sure because he's got these massive, strong legs. So we'll see. That's maybe not the best thing for rings workers. You normally see rings workers with like massive upper bodies and tiny legs. But yeah, he turned over watching the Olympic rings final, which was really, really cool. And I just really remember that being really awesome. Just watching gymnastics actually with him. I think when I watched the Olympics, and Ozzy was there with me, and he was sat watching with me, and we watched all the team guys and the GB guys in the team final and stuff. I was like, oh, this is actually going to be really cool to show him videos of me when he's older one day and be like, oh, your dad used to do this. And this is why this is great. And doing this podcast today for me is brilliant. I want to do this, try and do this every year. So almost a chapter of his life every year, and my experience of being a dad. And then maybe one day, if he goes on to be a dad, he'll be able to almost go through and listen to these podcasts and hopefully, you know, number one, learn about my experience of being his father, but also pick some advice and tips up, which would be brilliant. I mean, I would have loved to have had that from my dad, to listen to what was going on in his head, what he was struggling with, what were the things that, you know, he remembered, his memories. I think that'd be a really cool thing. It's almost like a time capsule. If this could be like a podcast time capsule for my son, this would be really cool. So yeah, that 6 month mark, it gets exciting. It gets a bit more manageable. Sleep starts to improve a little bit. It did for us, and they start to move a little bit more, and then it gets quite fun. And as I went into that autumn, and that financial burden was kind of weighing a bit heavier on my shoulders, because I knew that essentially Connie's maternity leave was going to come to an end at some point, because she's going to take the full year off work. And so at that point, I really did have to cover absolutely everything. And I knew I was going to have to get more work and try and find work from somewhere. I had a really interesting conversation with one of my friend's dads. So my friend, Ollie, who's my mortgage advisor, Ollie Rowland Mortgages, for anybody that needs a mortgage in Nottingham. I know I've got to remortgage pretty soon, and I'm not looking forward to what that rate's going to be. But his dad is a great guy. And I saw him at David Lloyd, and I said, how you getting on, mate? You okay? Because he's a pretty amazing guy as well. He's just had cancer, and you would never know it because he's in the gym all the time. He's playing tennis, so positive, always got a lot of time for me. So I really like this man. Like, he's a brilliant guy, and he gave me some great advice. And I basically went to him and I said, I'm struggling a little bit, mate, with the weight of the responsibility, and I don't know whether I need to go and seek out some advice from maybe some kind of mentor figures or not. And at the moment, those people that I would typically go to are maybe not in a place that they can give me their advice, because, you know, they've got a lot on themselves. And I just don't know whether I should be going to seek that out, or whether actually, like, this pressure to look after Connie, look after Ozzy, provide for the family, whether or not I'm just going to get used to the weight of that and adapt to it. And he basically said, yes, mate. what happens is you get used to that weight. And I don't know whether it was Sam, but someone in the last couple of weeks I had this conversation with him. It might have been Sam. Maybe he'll nod if it was him. He said, yeah, I guess it's like bench pressing, lifting weights, right? Like, if you jump from 80 kilos to 100 kilos, in the beginning, that's going to feel so heavy. But eventually, you're going to get used to that weight. You're going to get stronger, and you're going to be able to lift that bench, lift that weight, lift that 100 kilos. And you're going to adapt to that weight. And I think it's a bit like that. You just learn you understand, you learn to manage and feel the weight of that responsibility. And I've started to feel that now. And if I feel overwhelmed, I don't necessarily jump to, oh, what am I going to do? Can somebody come and help me? It's like, oh no, it's supposed to feel this heavy. Like, this is just a new thing for me, a new experience. I just got to embrace it, do my best, and eventually I'll be able to carry this load. And I think that was a really, really great thing to hear from him. And I did notice pretty early on that it's really important, I think, when you become a new parent, and particularly a new dad, and this is for both people, I probably need to spend time with other dads, because we're going to have conversations and we're going to be able to relate in a different way than new mums are with other new mums, right? And Connie needs from me to know that I've got my shit together, essentially, and that I'm going to be reliable, because she needs that from me. She needs me to support the family, right? So there are certain things that I think you have to go, right, and this was Ollie's dad gave me this advice as well. He was like, you need to learn and almost cherry pick the people you can go to for different parts of your life and different bits of advice. They'll be the right person for the right kind of questions. And I think that's one thing I've learned in life, just in general, over the last few years, is that you don't have to share everything with everyone. And some things you're struggling with will be best suited to your friends. Some things might be best suited to your parents. Some things might be best suited to somebody that maybe isn't a close friend, but they know you and they understand things and they can look from the outside. And maybe some things are strangers, and you share that with a stranger, and they maybe, they're never going to see you again, and they can go give you a little bit of advice like that. And I think that's a really important thing, because you can't share everything with everyone, and it's not necessarily always the right thing to share certain things with certain people, because they're just not best placed to help you with that. So, that's one thing that I've picked up with since becoming a dad. It's picking the right person for the right bit of advice and the right questions that you've got. And they might give you that advice, you might listen, and you might not take that advice. And also, one thing I think it's really important that I've learned throughout my life so far is that, always be wary of taking advice from people that aren't going to deal with those consequences, especially if it's big things. You maybe take everything with a pinch of salt, but in the end, you always have to make your own decision. And I think a lot of being a dad is it's that mature. You just got to mature. You just mature really fast. I read Jordan Peterson's book and finished it in the first few months when Ozzy was born. I really like that book. It's like 12 Rules for Life. It's a great book. And there's a few chapters in there that are really, really helpful. And I think as you get older and as you try to mature, I think when you become a parent is almost that last step. You don't have to have this. People can find this in other ways, but for me, it was like the last step of growing up. It was like once I became solely responsible for another human being, that was when I did it. That's when I finished my growing up, And I like that responsibility. I like being a dad. I like having that responsibility. I like the weight of that now. It feels good, It feels very purposeful, and it makes it much easier. I think I struggled before Ozzy was born, particularly when I retired, of understanding where I fit in with the world. What's my role? How do I help? How do I interact now with the world? Now I'm not just a gymnast. I had a very clear goal, a very clear job when I was a gymnast. It was really obvious for me. I knew every day when I woke up what I was supposed to be doing. I think I had a bit of a limbo period in between retiring and then becoming a dad, whereas now I know what I'm doing. I know the future we want. I know what our goals are. I know the life that we want to live as a family, and it's really easy to just wake up, go work hard and aim towards that goal now. That's been brilliant for me, having that focus point again. It's very rare that I struggle for motivation. There'll be the odd day, but it's very rare, whereas in the past I had that quite a lot. And I think on those very, very tough days when you're feeling super tired, like both me and Sam are today, you're able to get up and go and record a podcast like this because you've got that drive. And that's been a real beautiful thing to have back in my life. I think I lost that drive for a long time. I think I had that in me when I was an athlete, particularly in the first maybe half of my career, but maybe lost it towards the end. And I've got that kind of drive back and that thirst for life, optimism. Yeah, and that's one thing I've really tried to do this year. And as we approach the last chapter, I guess, of this 12 months, when it gets really fun, and as Ozzy got towards like 10 months, about the 10-month mark, he was sleeping. So for us was great. We're super lucky that he's sleeping through most of the time. And as he got to that 10-month mark, he started to do things fast. And all of a sudden you start feeling time speed up, like really speed up. I had a chat with one of my friends in the last year, and he has a pretty wild conspiracy theory. And I was like, I'll entertain it. I'm the guy that's going to entertain it. And he was like, do you know what? I really think they've sped time up. And I was like, what? What do you mean they've sped time up? He was like, don't you think things are moving even faster now? Like the weeks just roll. I was like, you know what? Maybe there's something to that. Like the weeks do seem to just kind of roll into each other, and before you know it, it's like Monday again. You're like, what's going on? And there are times where I often think, am I in a dream or is this a simulation? Like, what's going on? But like at 10 months, he started crawling, standing up. He's starting to potentially try and walk, cruise, talking, clapping his hands, waving, and it's just all the time. He's doing a new thing every couple of days. You never want to miss it, and that's one thing I'm very lucky to be and fortunate to be in the position where, because I am my own boss essentially, I do spend time with Ozzy nearly every single day, so I don't really miss things. And Connie's great at like video and things if I do, and she sends them to me, and it puts a big smile on my face when I finish coaching or whatever it might be. But at that 10-month mark, like everything just goes whew. And I think that's only going to speed up in the next 12 months as he becomes a toddler. And I can't even imagine. I often look at toddlers and go, I can't imagine Ozzy being like that. But then when he was first born, I couldn't imagine him being a 1-year-old, and yeah, that 10-month mark, I think as he started sleeping and all these things started happening, I had a real creative boost again. And that creative boost came around the time that me and Sam started doing our documentaries. And, I look back now and we did a real great job, man. At the end of last year, hitting 2 on the bounce. November, December, we went to Leeds and filmed a documentary. We went to Germany and filmed a documentary. All around everything else, it was a great job that we did. And I think we were both so exhausted at the start of the year that we couldn't really... It's been hard to take it all in, but I'm so happy with the success of the Leeds documentary. We've had some amazing feedback, and we've been very, very lucky to have some great people not only share and promote the work that we did there, but send us some great feedback and some great messages. And, I don't think there's a lot of that in the space of gymnastics. Last night, this is so interesting, because there are 2 people that I follow on YouTube now, their content, and they've both been on the podcast. I just admire their work and what they're doing, because I see what they're doing and I really enjoy it, and for different reasons. But Joe Kenwin Jones, every Sunday he releases an episode on YouTube, and he's been doing it for a while, and they're getting better and they're getting better, and I can see them getting better every single week. And I messaged him last week and I said, Joe, don't stop, keep going, because I wished when I was still training at that point in 2019, I'd have been able to find a way to keep documenting my journey, because one day you're going to look back and you're going to be so grateful for that. And I know one day I'm going to sit down with Ozzy and go through every single YouTube video that we released and vlog and be like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is like a video journal for him to watch and for me to look back on and smile at. And for him, he's going to have that. And just the quality of his editing and his content is getting so good. And maybe it doesn't, maybe in his head you can think, oh, right, it's not really growing at the rate I'd want it to, but he just needs to keep going because he's got a Commonwealth Games coming up next year. He's gymnastics. I love his gymnastics. He came to Knots last year and trained. I think it's beautiful. It's incredibly stylish. I think he's going to do really well in this new code of points. So anybody that is maybe looking for somebody who enjoys our content and wants to watch something similar, Joe Kenwin Jones on YouTube is brilliant. Like you can follow his journey, his gymnastics journey. It's really well put together. It's beautiful. It's maybe similar to the kind of footage that we shoot in a way. And so hopefully it'd be nice, if that was inspired in any way by what we do, that's brilliant. So Joe Kenwin Jones there, and Jay Thompson, who's a friend of mine, came on the podcast. We had a great conversation. That episode did really well. Jay is starting to release more regular YouTube content, and Jay's retired now, so it's great to follow somebody else that's retired. And last night, I click on it, his video comes up on YouTube, and I went, oh, great, I'll watch Jay's video while I'm washing the pots. And halfway through, he says, I just want to highlight two other content creators that are doing a great job at the minute. And he shouted out me and Sam and just said how great our work was and how much he loves our content. And it was just, he didn't need to do that. I didn't ask him to do that. And he was great. He gave us some really good feedback on the episode. And it was very positive and some of it constructive, which I really wanted. I wanted that from other creators that I respect. But I watch his work because I really enjoy it. I like his vlogs. They're great. And I know that he's into that world. But the fact that he did that was brilliant because I was planning to do that myself. So now I've returned the favor, and I'm thinking whether there's room for me, Jay, and Joe to maybe do some kind of cool little collaboration. I think that'd be really cool. You know, get all three of us together, and maybe it's me and Jay going to the gym with Joe, and we can watch his gymnastics, and maybe I'm in there and I ask Joe some questions while we're going on, and maybe Jay's part of the team of shooting it, and like we could do this cool thing where Sam shoots Jay shooting us, and I think that'd be really cool because I think all three of us, you know, we're different creators, but we're in the same space, and I think we admire each other's work. I think that'd be really cool. And I think around that time, that creative boost came from seeing the possibilities in Ozzy for his life, right? Like, I could see that potential. And that's the one thing that, for me, it's helped. I'm trying really hard to be more positive. I saw a screenshot, and Joe Fraser sent me a message on Ozzy's birthday and said, "Happy birthday to Ozzy, man." And then he said, "I've just been scrolling through my notes on my phone, and a couple of years ago you sent me this quote." And I think the quote I'd sent him was, "Never forget what got you to the dance in the first place, Joe. Too many people forget that." And he was like, this is brilliant. Like, I've just read it. And I sent him a few back, and the quotes that I sent him back were some quotes from Winston Churchill, who's just... like, I love his quotes. They're absolutely brilliant. And I know he gets a lot of hate from people, but for me, he's like one of the greatest British people we've ever had, right? So I go, and I love World War II. It's like my favorite period in history. Anything World War II, I watch all the time. And there was a few Winston Churchill quotes, and one of them was brilliant. And I was like, that is what I'm trying to do this year. It was, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Like, what an amazing quote that is. And I think for me, at times, I can be guilty of seeing the difficulty in situations and not seeing the opportunity in them. And when I look back, and I sat with Niall on our podcast last week, and I said, actually, the periods in my life where I've learned the most and I've grown the most since then have been those most difficult challenges. And I'm hoping that's the case with the difficulties and the challenges that I've faced in the first 12 months of Ozzy's life. I think this is just going to make me a better human being and a better dad. And it's certainly, I'm going to have learned a lot through these 12 months once I'm able to sit back and digest it. And I'll look back on it with the fondest memories. Like, oh, it's just been incredible, man. Like, I'm so proud to be his dad, and we have the most amazing relationship. He's just the best little boy in the world, and I think, you know, I wouldn't trade it for anything. You know, I say to people, right, like, if you're going to get something amazing as a child, it's going to be difficult. There's two sides to every coin. Like, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. Like, it has to be, you know. All good things take time, and something amazing as bringing new life into the world is going to be a massive, massive challenge. But that's the beauty of it. That's why it's so amazing. It wouldn't mean as much if it was easy, right? Like, that's why it's incredible to go to the Olympic Games, to be an Olympian. It's hard. Not many people get to do it. Like, that's why it's so special. And yeah, for me, being a parent it's made my life feel so much more meaningful. It's made it feel purposeful. I'm so happy. For sure, that isn't the be-all and end-all for everybody, but for me, it really feels like the thing I was supposed to do. And yeah, I can't wait. Like, I'm able to look. There are times where I feel sad almost that he's growing up so quick, and it feels like it's going so fast. But I'm so excited for the future. Like, we took him to the Sea Life Centre for his birthday, and I don't know who had more fun. You know, I don't know whether it was him or me. I was so excited. And I was like, oh my God, we can do cool things like this all the time. And I've got a list of the best playgrounds that I've come across in the last 12 months. So that when he's ready and he's on his feet, we can go to those playgrounds and I can rank them out of 10. And I'm so excited, man. I can't wait to take him to the gym. As soon as he drops his morning nap and he's on his feet, we're taking him to the gymnastics club, which is cool, right? Because, like, I always had that thing of, like, would you get him into gymnastics? I'm so excited. I'm like, yeah, let's go to the gym. I think he'll love it because he just cannot sit still. I think Connie's starting to maybe wonder whether he's a little bit like me. I'm just sure he's going to be a bit like me, right? Because he's 50% me and 50% his mom. But it's just going to be so amazing, man. I can't wait for that. It's going to be so good for me. You know, those days where I'm not knowing what to do, I'm just going to be able to play with him and get him to do things and take him outside and show him the world. And like, it's just the coolest thing, man. Like, it's the best journey. And it makes all of this stuff way more worthwhile for me. Like, I love it. Like, and it's given me that, like I said, I think, you know, for 2025, I'm like in a period now where I want to just go. I've like got the drive and I just want to go forward, and there's some great things happening for me. Like I've got some great opportunities coming up that I'm really excited about, and the podcast is doing really well. We've got some really cool guests coming up, like big guests, that is very exciting the next couple of months. And the documentaries that we're planning for the rest of this year, and you know, my work in schools has picked up a lot, and my coaching is doing well, and I'm getting asked to do consultancy work here and there, which I'm enjoying because I'm being able to use my expertise and my knowledge and give back, and I just love my life, man. And if you'd have asked me 6 years ago, like, if I could have seen me 6 years ago when I was in a very different place to where I am right now, oh man, it would have been everything I needed to see. And it would have, you know, I wish you could give that to someone that's in that space. I wish you could show them what the future could look like. But I think, yeah, if you take anything away from my story, if there's anybody out there that is maybe right now not in a good space and wants to be, it's that I was at the very bottom. I reached my bottom, and now I feel like I'm at the very top of how this is the best and the most fulfilled, the most at peace and the most content I've ever felt in my life. And that doesn't mean I don't face challenges and there are days where I feel tired, like I'm exhausted today. But if you were to stop and ask me, are you happy? Oh, yeah, man. Like, this is the life that I wanted. And this is the life I want, and I'm living it right now. And I think it's very important for me now, as I get busier and there are more opportunities, is to just remember what the goal is. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to get to a point where I'm working so much that I forget that actually the reason I did this in the first place is so I could spend time with Ozzy and be with him and be around him. So being in a position to pick and choose what it is that I want to do and how I want to spend my time, I think is very important. So that's one thing that I'm going to really focus on and just not lose sight of, because I think that's probably quite easy to do. As you get those opportunities and they start coming in, you start saying yes to everything. I think I don't want to do that. And for me right now, like, I'm really happy with how my life's going, and I think you never want to jump too far ahead too quickly. It needs to be slow, gradual growth for the long term, and I think that's how you get the best things. You don't want to grow too fast. I've seen that. I've been that guy that went to the Olympics at 19, and that does not end well when you jump too many steps too fast. So for me, it's all about that gradual growth, staying true to the work that we've been doing over the past 2 years now, but also just making sure that I keep that end goal of, I want to be able to have time, spend time with Ozzy. That's the most important thing. Spend time with Connie and, you know, make sure that I'm able to do the work that I really enjoy. And it's working. It's working. And again, if there's anybody out there that's umming and ahhing about maybe going freelance, the advice I'd give you is make sure you're in the right circumstances to take that risk. I had a good backup. I had savings from my gymnastics career, and I also knew that if anything went wrong, I'd have a coaching job for me, and I could go back to it. But if you're in a position and you're about to embark on that journey and you're going to take that risk, you can create something really incredible. I've been able to do that. It takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of responsibility, again, that falls on your shoulders, but it is worthwhile in the end if you're able to make a success of it. And if you're not, maybe it's just not the right time or not the right thing, and maybe you can do that again in the future. But yeah, for me, I think this first year of Ozzy's life has been absolutely incredible. He makes me so proud. He's such a happy little man. Whenever I get home, it just runs for me, jumps for me. He's constantly just, you know, he's switched now. He's just saying mama at the moment. But he, you know, it's amazing to have that connection with him, and I've got that connection with him because I put the time in and I was able to do that. And I think that's one thing I'm really proud of. I think I'm a great dad. I'm really proud of that. And it's been an amazing 12 months. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode today. I think it'll be a nice break from a lot of the gymnastics content that we've got coming up. We've got some big guests, like I say. We're going to hit the ground running again as we get into the spring and we go into the summer. If you haven't watched the documentary yet with Harry and Luke, it's on YouTube. The episodes recently, the interviews with the coaches from Leeds, I think is a great one for coaches, shining a bit of light on the work that the coaches do and the great work that those personal coaches do, because they don't always get that recognition when the lads go out and they compete for GB on the Olympic and world stage. It's often the national coaches, they're not the personal ones, and the personal coaches are the guys doing 99% of the work. So it was great to give them that recognition. I think a lot of coaches that watched that video and that short film appreciated that. It's one thing we want to do a little bit more of in the future. Thank you to everybody. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. We're about to hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube again, which is really cool. And like I said, there's going to be more consistent content, and you can follow us. The best place to keep up to date with everything that's going on with the podcast is on Instagram. So follow me there, and just keep an eye out. And thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I'll see you in the next one.